Anwen sighed as she finished drying off her hair. Her skin still felt sensitive to the touch. It made the towel feel like sandpaper against her flesh. It wasn't a comfortable sensation, and she hoped it would pass already. Even the water had not been quite as soothing as usual, but at least she was clean. Knocking on the door separating her room from the others, she turned the knob, hoping the others were decent.
I'm coming in,
She announced before anyone could answer. She saw Tyler sprawled across the double bed. The Dragon Lord looked up as she entered the room, watching her almost warily as she walked towards him.
You seem different.
He observed as he moved to a sitting position.
I know you dozed off on the drive here, but it seems something happened while you slept. Tell me.
Anwen moved to sit near him, though she scooted far enough away that he couldn't touch her.
I saw the revenants.
She confessed, then began to tell him about her dream. She couldn't help but shudder as she recalled their appearance. It was something akin to the darkest of anyone's nightmares.
You have seen the face of the enemy.
Tyler mused. That was bound to change things. Even though she'd seen the enemy in previous visions, it had not been with such detail. He could well imagine what she must have seen, and it made him shudder as well. He reached out a hand, but she flinched away from his touch.
I'm not going to hurt you.
He soothed.
I only want to know if I can see what you did with more clarity.
Contemplating what he might mean by that, Anwen decided best to let him do whatever he had in mind. His intentions seemed more than honorable. She really had nothing to worry about. Looking chagrined, she moved a few inches closer to him so he need not reach quite as far, but still far enough away he couldn't embrace her. Tyler placed his thumb over the spot on her forehead mystics might call the third eye. He placed his other hand on her shoulder as he closed his eyes, concentrating. It helped that they already had a connection. Part of him wished there were easier ways for him to see what she had seen earlier. This wouldn't be comfortable for either of them. He had to remind himself not to look too deeply. Anwen's body went rigid as Tyler delved into her memories like an eel in a tight tunnel. It hurt worse than her already sensitive skin, her entire body prickling as with static electricity. Part of her had the audacity to wonder if he could do this with anyone, or was it something he could do with her because they shared a soul? The greater part of her decided it didn't matter. She just wanted it to stop. Tyler's hand tightened on her shoulder. She bit back the urge to call out in protest as the images of the day flew in front of her mind's eye like a movie in fast forward. Without realizing it, she pulled away, breaking his contact with her forehead, her chest heaving. Walter chose that moment to exit the bathroom wearing a t-shirt and some sweatpants.
Did I miss something?
He asked as he observed the two. He couldn't help but feel he had. They looked like they'd shared an intimate moment he wouldn't be able to understand. The only difference was that they both looked shaken by it, almost shocked, if he had to put a name to it. The dragon removed his hand from Anwen's shoulder, flexing his fingers as he gave her an odd look.
I'm sorry.
He said to her, instead of answering Walter right away.
I didn't realize your inside had become that strong. I can help soothe some of the pain away, if you like.
But Anwen shook her head. Like a limb starved for blood, she had already grown accustomed to the sensation enough to live with it.
Tell me what you did.
She insisted instead.
It felt like you were crawling around inside my head, not just looking. I couldn't help but be reminded of Daphne haunting my thoughts.
The two men exchanged glances. This was news to the both of them.
Why didn't you tell me Daphne was haunting you?
Tyler asked, almost as if he feared to spook her. Anwen shrugged.
I didn't want you to think less of me.
She admitted. Now she thought about it. She wasn't sure why she hadn't told him. It was possible it was a matter of stubborn pride.
There was enough going on that I didn't want to make you worry more.
Tyler couldn't help but shake his head.
Anwen, I need you to promise me. You'll tell me when anything like that happens. It's not normal, and you could get yourself hurt. Understand?
He cupped his hands around her chin, tilting her face so she had to look into his eyes. He noted her eyes had returned to their normal hazel green coloring.
And what about what you did to me? Is that normal?
She retorted in a rare burst of temper as she moved away from his touch. She'd been flung around from one side of the continent to the other. She'd no more been in control of her surroundings than she was the color of the sky. There was only so much a person could take before they broke, and she thought she might be reaching that point. Walter chose to pick up a random magazine someone had left on the nightstand. He headed to the other of the dual rooms, leaving the door open enough he would know when it was safe to come back in. These two had a few things to hash out, and it was probably wise to stay out of the way. Tyler closed his blue eyes, his shoulders sagging.
It's different.
He answered once he'd calmed himself down. Part of him had wanted to lash back, but he didn't.
I know you've been under a lot of stress. It's only natural you feel upset.
He felt tempted to pull her into a hug, but again, he didn't. He doubted she'd appreciate it in her current mindset.
Only natural.
She mimicked.
Do you have any idea how hard it is to feeling like I'm doing nothing but get dragged around like a rock tied to a string? Bumping into anything and everything? Catching on everything in the way? I've tried so hard to keep it together. But to be honest, I can't help but think I may be finally losing it. And it takes a lot to make me do that.
That hadn't been the best way to go about it, Tyler decided. But he had to assert some kind of authority, or she'd keep hiding things from him. Things that might get them all killed.
Okay.
He placated.
You're right. It's been one indignity after another, and I don't blame you for being upset. I'd be upset if I were in your shoes.
She puckered her lips, much like Margo might have if she'd still been alive. She'd folded her arms across her chest in an almost defensive stance. She sighed.
I don't want to fight. I just want to know what's going on and how I can actually do something about it.
You're tired.
Tyler observed.
We're all tired and we should get some sleep. But I do want to answer your question about what I did when I looked through your memories before you retire. It's a technique only the Elder Dragons use, though it makes it easier when we're connected. It's an extension of soul sight and soul speech, except it goes to a different level and tends to be rather one-sided. You may have noticed you couldn't see it in my memories. You have to know what you're doing, or it doesn't end well.
What he didn't tell her was that it was used most often to get information from reluctant sources. Anwen gave him a look he wasn't sure how to explain, though it wasn't a pleasant one.
I wish you'd told me that before you did it.
She admonished.
I've had enough people mess with my head for a lifetime. Next time, please just take my word for it and I'll promise to let you know if anything else like that happens. Deal?
Tyler supposed that was the best he was going to get.
Deal.
He agreed, though he didn't reach out his hand to shake on it, certain she wouldn't appreciate the gesture.
Now, I don't know about you, but I'm tired, and I really don't need you watching me sleep. We should all go to bed. Isn't that right, Walter?
Looking chagrined, Walter peered around the door jamb from the other room. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but they'd both been loud enough it was hard to block out.
I could use a good couple hours of sleep now.
He agreed, choosing not to mention the brief argument that was between the two of them.
Good.
Tyler commented as he let himself fall back against the bedding.
No more talking tonight.
It didn't take a rocket scientist to realize Tyler had pretty much kicked her out of the room. Anwen stood abruptly and strode back to her room, trying not to slam the door behind her. Part of her wanted to smack him in that moment, but she knew it wouldn't do her any good. They were all tired. Close quarters also didn't help, but at least she had this moment of privacy. One that didn't include sleeping in a tent. She'd take what she could get. Morning came early for Anwen. She hadn't set out to wake early, but her body was up before her mind could catch up with it. Almost on autopilot, she went through her typical morning routine. She felt glad she'd thought to pack a toothbrush this time around, even if she hadn't remembered the other usual toiletries. At least the hotel had soap she could use. When she re-entered the room, she couldn't help but feel a bit surprised to see her mother sitting on the bed.
Good morning, Anwen. Rise and shine.
Margo greeted. She still looked as transparent, outlined in green, as she had the night before. Anwen shook her head, blinking a few times as her brain finally caught up with the rest of her.
Oh, how early is it?
She wondered, realizing the sun hadn't yet come up outside. She moved to peek out the window, noting the parking lot lights were still on. For some reason, the alarm clock in the room was flashing like there had been a power outage. Margo waited for her daughter to finish her investigation. She watched her as she came back to the bed and stared at her.
I saw you practice your fire building skills yesterday.
She commented.
Well, it did take you a while. You were able to get the flames going. Have you tried listening more? Or was that just dumb luck?
The teen mage hung her head, realizing what her mother meant. Pure stubbornness was not going to get her where she needed to go, and that was the only thing that had helped her with the fire.
I'm trying, okay?
She protested.
I don't seem to be in the right headspace or something. I don't know.
She plopped down into the bed next to her mother's ghost, burying her head in her hands. Margo resisted the urge to pull her daughter into her arms. It wouldn't do any of them any good.
Do you remember how you felt when you were on the river and the landslide occurred? Were you trying to push yourself? Or did it just happen?
Anwen rubbed at her eyes. Sleep still beckoned from behind her eyelids.
I don't know.
She exclaimed.
I was just listening. Everything seemed nice and in harmony, and then there was the rumble of the earth. It was like the slightest hints of bass in an orchestra. Except I could hear it speak.
Her words seemed to give Margo pause, her body tensing.
You heard it speak?
The woman tried to understand what her daughter meant. Every time she'd listened to the celestial music of nature, she had never heard anything talk. Each structure, every bit of organized matter had a melody. She had only ever heard the music. Looking more than a little confused, Anwen couldn't help but shrug.
Well, yeah.
She confessed.
The water said, "Don't mind me." The boat asked to be excused, and the bird said hello. I think the falling earth said it was coming true. I get the impression it didn't have much of a choice and was trying to be polite.
Margo stood and began pacing the room.
And what were you doing when you heard them speak?
She watched her daughter as she gathered her thoughts. Anwen searched through what she could remember of the incident.
I was sitting at the prow of the boat with my eyes closed. I was trying to listen to the way the water flowed around us, like I'd been taught. And then I became one with the water. It spoke to me. I guess you could say it was like when Karlie spoke with me before the matter was opened.
Margo's eyes went wide at the realization of what she was hearing. She couldn't help but cover her mouth with one hand as her lips parted in surprise.
Do you know what you're saying?
She asked.
Anwen, do you have any idea what you've done?
Not sure if her mother was shocked or alarmed, Anwen couldn't help but feel defensive.
No?
She answered, her body going tense as if anticipating a physical blow.
What have I done?
Anwen,
Margo continued to look at her with a sense of awe.
you have gone beyond what even I was capable of in life. Not only have you seen the organization of matter and listened to its song, you have communed with the souls of those living beings.
The Keda couldn't help but look confused and unsure of what was going on.
But I thought water was just water.
She protested.
And dirt is just dirt. They're not alive. Are they?
Still giving her daughter an odd look, Margo waved her hands to form a sphere of green energy.
All things organized into matter contain a soul.
She said.
Be it water, earth, air, or fire, it all breathes in its own way, exists in its own way, lives in its own way. And because it exists, it is alive. Do you understand?
Anwen began, trying to put all the pieces together. It made sense, in a way. If the water and the earth could talk to her, and she could ask fire to come into being, then maybe it was alive.
So, does that mean that when a mage conjures a light orb, he or she is creating life?
Margo shook her head.
No, not exactly.
She replied.
The potential is there, but we are not gods. Maybe the best way to look at it is to suggest that the matter is already there, only somewhat disorganized. We ask it to change according to our needs. The potential is there inside what is already living. The only difference is we repurpose it in different ways. Does that make sense?
The teen blinked a few times as the ideas cemented into her mind.
I think so. But that means I need to train my mind to communicate with matter. It's not just listening.
She fell back against the mattress as the implications set in. The feeling of awe overwhelmed her, and she couldn't help but stare up at the ceiling.
Why didn't you explain it like this to me in the first place?
I didn't know.
Margo confessed.
I had no idea you were on such a level, and by my own instruction, I was forcing you to ignore what you already knew. Anwen, you are capable of doing things that no other mage has ever done before, or may ever do again.
Anwen pushed up into a semi-reclining position.
Why do people keep telling me that?
She exclaimed.
It's always something along the lines of I'm the only one who can do this or that. What makes me so special? I'm just a normal girl, caught up in extraordinary events.
Margo had to resist the urge to take hold of her daughter now.
Anwen,
She admonished.
you are so much more than just a normal girl. You are the master keykeeper of Tarragon, the Keda, and as such the master mage. I know you didn't ask for this. None of it. But it's who you are. And the sooner you come to terms with that, the sooner you will be able to realize your full potential. For lack of any other way of putting it, you are the one chosen for this purpose.
What if I don't want to be chosen for this?
Anwen retorted.
I didn't ask for this. And I sure as anything don't seem to be given a choice. Can you even begin to imagine what it must be like for me? Being dragged from one moment to the next? Not understanding why any of this is happening. Do you have any idea how helpless I felt? And yet, I've tried to pretend I'm strong. Knowing I'm not. I'm really not.
Sobs tore from her throat and her body shuddered.
I'm not cut out for this.
Arms held her, though it felt nothing like her mother's embrace.
Can't do it.
But she didn't care. The dam had finally broken and she didn't know how to make it stop. The tears kept rolling. For the briefest of moments, she thought it was her father holding her. But her mind knew better. Her father was dead, murdered because of who he was and what he stood for. She pressed her head into the strong chest, eyes closed against the tears that refused to stop.
It's okay.
A gentle yet somewhat gruff voice said in her ear,
Trust me. It's okay to cry. Go ahead. Let it all out.
It took her a moment to realize it was Walter. She could see his dark skin when she opened her eyes. But realizing that didn't help her calm down. She shook her head, wishing Walter was her dad, knowing that was impossible.
I can't do it.
She whispered,
And I don't know how you do. I'm not like everyone else. I can't hold my own. I can't.
Walter smoothed her hair, reminded of the daughter he'd once had. Her death had inspired him to join the reserves in the first place. If she'd lived, she'd likely have children of her own by now. But that didn't stop him from feeling a need to support Anwen. They had both lost someone close to them, and there was no getting them back. That kind of loss left a scar that not even time could fade.
You do the best you can.
He told her, his eyes welling up.
You know, sometimes that's all you can do. Just take the cards you were dealt and do the best you can with them.
Anwen folded her legs up against her body. She then snuggled against his protective chest like she used to with her dad when she was little.
It's not the same.
She protested, the sobs at least quieting a bit as her energy ran down.
I can't do this alone.
Hey,
Walter admonished, causing her to look up. He moved a strand of hair from her face.
listen, you're not alone. I know it may seem like it sometimes, but you're not. I heard part of what you said to your mother. Don't ask me how I knew she was there, because even I don't understand. But I think you should listen. You have a special gift, a real special gift. You have to learn how to use it.
Ha!
Anwen pouted. She almost couldn't help it, but it felt appropriate somehow.
From what my mom told me, I'm the only one who can do what I do. And I don't even know what I'm doing. So I can hear the earth speak to me. How's that supposed to help me do whatever it is I'm supposed to do?
Walter shrugged.
I don't know. I have no idea.
He confessed.
But doesn't that prove my point? If you can hear the earth speak, doesn't that mean it's trying to tell you something? Doesn't that mean it's alive? Maybe it wants to be friends. Maybe it wants something else. You're the only one who can find that out, not anyone else. Do it for you.
For whatever reason, Walter's words seemed to make her feel a bit better about everything.
Thanks.
She said between sniffles.
I mean it. Maybe Tyler's as clueless about how my abilities work as my mom was. Doesn't help that I seem to be one of a kind. I know everyone growing up wishes they were unique like that, but let me tell you, it sucks. And I'm tired of pretending I'm strong.
The veteran chuckled at that, his voice still a bit thick with unshed tears.
I had a daughter once.
He confessed as he moved so she could sit next to him instead of in his arms.
And yes, I was married.
He added before she could ask.
What happened to them?
Anwen asked without thinking. She couldn't help but pick up on the tense she used. That, and she'd never seen even a hint that he'd ever been married. She hadn't noticed any rings on his finger, no feminine touch at his home. Walter looked towards the far wall. He ran one hand over his close-cropped hair, wondering if he should bother shaving it again or let it grow out. It was easier to wonder than to think about the past.
They died.
he finally answered.
I was young. A bit dumb, but so much in love. There was a fire. I wasn't home when it happened, but they said a gas line leaked somewhere, and all it took was one spark. That was it.
Anwen couldn't help but look up into Walter's stalwart face.
I'm so sorry.
She consoled.
I know what it's like to lose more than one loved one.
Images of her father's death flashed behind her eyes, overlapped by the images of her mother's death. The veteran seemed to shake out of the memory.
I don't think I even told Tyler about that. Ever.
He confessed.
It didn't ever come up. Right after that, I enlisted and got pulled into training. It somehow made it easier to deal with it all, if you know what I mean.
She placed a comforting hand on Walter's shoulder.
I can only imagine what you must have felt.
She confessed. No two deaths were the same, as she was only too aware. Time and experience changed how one dealt with them, but the pain never actually went away. She had no idea what it might feel like to lose a child. It had to be 10 times worse than losing her parents. Walter sniffed a bit, blinking back the moisture from his eyes.
I'd appreciate if you kept that bit from Tyler.
He requested.
Just as there are many things about him I don't know, there are things about me he doesn't need to know. It can be our little secret.
He gave her a companionable smile. Anwen nodded. She felt something warm expand in her chest at being trusted with this piece of Walter's past. No one had ever confided something with her like this before.
I promise,
she said, holding out her hand for him to shake, which he took with a bit of a chuckle.
Speaking of Tyler, where is he?
Standing, Walter rubbed at the back of his neck.
Well, when I last checked, he was still out. Guess yesterday took a bit out of him, too. That or it could have been those sleeping pills I slipped in his drink last night.
The horror scrawling across Anwen's face brought out a chuckle from his full lips.
I'm only joking.
He assured her.
Well, chances are good he was just tired. Besides, I don't have any sleeping pills on me this time. Nor would I risk his wrath on that kind of practical joke.
Yeah.
Anwen intoned, looking more like her usual self.
I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate that.
She smiled up at her friend.
But we'd better wake him up, if he hasn't already. We only have, 4 more days before we have to head back? I'd like to make the best of them.
Walter pulled her into a side hug, propelling her towards the doors separating their rooms.
Come on, let's go risk the wrath of a dragon.
He laughed, causing Anwen to smile. It was an infectious sound.